Okay, let's get started. And if people join, they join. Anybody else who wants to come on video, feel free. If you want to come on video for part of the time, feel free to do that. All great. So my friends, I am Alana Steinhain. Thank you so much for joining. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be spending these 2 sessions online talking about a topic that actually since the pandemic began has been close to my heart. And that topic is the question of how do we inculcate a sense of mutual responsibility in society? Because I'd imagine you noticed similar things, but during the pandemic, at the beginning especially, there was just this recognition that we are so dependent on each other, in the sense of people being honest about exposures, people keeping themselves from certain places if they would be a danger to someone else. In a certain sense, we were kind of asking people on Scout's honor to keep each other protected, to keep each other safe. And it dawned on me that we kind of assume that people will take care of each other, but we don't necessarily talk about how we get a society to be like that. And so what I thought I would do in this session and in the session on March 22nd is to actually look at 2 different ways that are used in society generally to try to get people to care about each other. And tonight's approach to it is going to be through the lens of creating rules, enforceable rules that are designed, whether or not they're designed to get people to feel something towards someone else is almost secondary. They are designed to get people to act in ways towards others that manifest a sense that someone else's well-being is important. And that's going to be tonight. On the 22nd, we're going to look at a different approach to inculcating a sense of responsibility for one another. And that is an educational approach. An approach that doesn't say, okay, we're going to be able to enforce a rule to get people to act in a way that takes someone else's concerns into account, but actually we're going to teach people educational ideas that are going to inspire them to want to take care of other people. And you can already imagine that if I asked you, Eunice, how am I going to get you to care about your neighbor? You'd probably say, look, making a rule that I have to do X, Y, Z towards my neighbor, it may get me to care about my neighbor. It may never get me to care about my neighbor, but bottom line, it will get me to act towards my neighbor in a way that isn't going to put them out. But if I said to you, what if I were going to teach you an educational concept? And maybe I wouldn't say it, I would just do it, right? I would make a movie that has this concept in it. I would write a book that has this concept in it. We would replicate this concept over and over again on a podcast that people would hear. And slowly, like the earworm that people would be getting is like, you're a really great person if you care about the person who lives next door, if you take their needs into account as well as your own. Now, that's not something that I'm enforcing. It's something that I'm kind of inspiring you to do. But on the one hand, that's great because it's going to get you to feel a certain way, and almost by your own volition, you may choose to do certain things for your neighbor that you don't have to do. But you also could probably say, I know it's really nice to be super nice to my neighbor, but that's not what I'm going to do today, right? Bottom line, it's not enforcement. So in these 2 sessions, we are going to look at 2 different rabbinic perspectives on how to get people to take another person into account. Tonight will be rule-based, and the next one will be education-based. And in each one of these, I want us to look at what are the advantages and the disadvantages of this approach. Because one of the things that I think is, it's actually a shame. We have this beautiful, beautiful canon of rabbinic literature called the Talmud. And a lot of people feel like it's too hard to learn. And even those who feel that it is not too hard to learn, they focus specifically on like the dance steps of the back and forth of the conversation And they don't zoom out to the bigger picture of like, what's the big question that the rabbis are trying to answer? And I think that in each of these sessions, tonight and the 22nd, we're actually going to see the rabbis wrestling with the question of how do we get people to do things for each other? Like, how do we actually get people to do things for each other? And in the course of their wrestling and going back and forth, you see them realizing, okay, well, this approach, it'll work, but only to this degree. And these are the positives and these are the negatives. So those are some of the things that I want to look at with you. How does that sound? And the hope is that like this actually will help inspire us to be better people. Meaning that's really the hope of it. So what I have tonight is I have a rule that the rabbis came up with. And that rule, before we look at any sources, the rule that the rabbis came up with has to do with the biblical city of Sodom, of Sodom and Gomorrah, and looking at that biblical city as the ultimate in not caring about the other. And based on what the rabbis called Midat Sodom, the attribute of a Sodomite, they said, if somebody is behaving like a Sodomite, we can stop them. We can enforce, we can make a rule, you cannot behave that way. Now, what does it mean to behave like a Sodomite? Well, let's take a look, okay? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at a source, and then because we're such a small group, I'm actually going to pause if anybody has any questions or comments about the source, because that's actually the beauty of using a small group like this, okay? So I'm going to share my screen and take a look, first, and we're not going to look at this right now. Maybe we'll look at this another time, like at another point tonight. But I want to just introduce what the rabbis thought was this character of Sodom, okay? We are in a very famous book, Pirkei Avot, Ethics of the Ancestors, or Ethics of the Fathers. And in Pirkei Avot, there's a Mishnah that seems there's a passage that seems so simple, but actually deceptively so. This is the section of Pirkei Avot, it's chapter 5, that talks a lot about personalities, like categories of personality. And here is where Sodom is going to come up. And it goes like this. Arba midot ba'adam. There are 4 different ways of being as a human. Ha'omer, someone who says, sheli sheli, what's mine is mine. V'shelcha shelcha, or shelcha shelach, what's yours is yours. Zo midah benonit. This is kind of an average, right? Meaning, the truth is, this is kind of the way that the world works in certainly, our more capitalistic societies. What's mine is mine, and what's the other Alanas is the other Alanas, right? Like, we even see each other name and say, what, Alana, that's me, right? It's very normal to say, what's mine is mine, what's yours is yours. That's the average way. But now look at this incredibly subversive line. V'yesh omrim, some people say, zo midat Sodom. This is the attribute of the Sodomites. What? Wait a second. So you're telling me that Alana should invite Connie, who should invite Gary, to say, look, I'm eating a salad. You can just take my salad. Or Connie says, I'm sitting on a chair. You can just take my chair. Eunice just says, you can take my drapes. What does this even mean? That what somebody says, when someone says what's mine is mine and what's yours is yours, that might be a Sodom-like attribute. I mean, the city of Sodom and Gomorrah, it was destroyed. That's terrible. What do we even mean by this? First of all, I'm curious if anybody on the call has any thoughts about that. The idea that an attribute that saying what's mine is mine and what's yours is yours, that would be Sodom-like behavior. Kind of shocking. Can anybody give a little texture to this? Anyone have a suggestion? And you can write it in the chat if that's more comfortable. Not everybody. And just remember to unmute yourself. Marina, go for it.
Sorry, I came in late.
No worries. We're just happy you're here.
Thank you. I think that sentence is saying that it's sodomite because you're not being selfless.
Huh. But one second, your dog is your dog, no? If I said to you, can you give me the only person, my Bubby, my grandmother, Allah Shalom, of blessed memory, I once said to her, Bubby, I love your watch. So she took it off and she gave it to me. But I don't expect a random person on the street to do that, right? Meaning, I think you're on to something. There are times when just saying there's a stark, clear boundary between us and what's mine is mine and what's yours is yours. There are times when there's something, I'm going to use the opposite, something that's a little selfish about it. And I want to see how the rabbis determine that, because they did not think that everybody should just share property. They did believe in like property boundaries. They actually believed in that stuff. But there's something about just sometimes being able to look away and say, well, that's not, well, that troubles them, right? And that's the example that I want to see tonight. This is where the idea, and I'm writing it in the chat, comes from Kofin al Midat Sodom. We enforce against behaving like Sodom. And this is how they're going to define it. You ready? Behaving like Sodom is the following. When I was a kid, we were on a family trip, and I'm not going to say which of my siblings was eating a bagel. Obviously, if I'm going to tell the story, I'm going to be the good guy in the story. But one of my siblings is eating a bagel. I only have one brother, I shouldn't say he. That sibling took a bite out of the bagel, ate half the bagel, was done with the bagel, is walking over to the garbage, and I say, hey, can I have the rest of that bagel? Plop, sibling drops it in the garbage. That, my friends, we were really little. That is the attribute of Sodom. Meaning, if you don't stand to lose, but somebody else stands to gain, and you still won't do it, that, the rabbis say, that's where, Marina, you're onto something. You can't say, what do you mean? What's mine is mine, and I'm throwing it out. If this was yours, you could have it. It's not yours, it's mine, I'm throwing it out. If I'm done with it, I'm done with it. This is what the rabbis identify. We can't allow it. Of course, we believe in separation of property, but there are times when this person stands to gain and I don't stand to lose, and I still won't do something for them. That's a problem, right? That's the line that they want to draw. So it's very nice to draw that line in theory. Let me ask a question. And if you don't have an example, don't worry about it, but you might. Do you have an example of this in your life where either somebody else isn't going to lose, but you would gain, and they still won't do it for you? Or the reverse, where you don't stand to lose anything and somebody else stands to gain, and still there's something you don't want to do it anyway. Or you could tell me the happy story where you realize, I'm not going to lose anything. I could do this for you. It's fine. Or the happy story of someone else doing for you. What do you think? Does anyone have like an example that comes to mind? The bagel example has stuck with me since I'm like 8. You should just know. This is, how clearly righteous I am, quote unquote. Any examples that people could think of? And there's a reason I'm asking for an example, right? I mean, we get the concept. Yeah, Marina.
Well, I'm living an example right now. It's a little complicated, but I'm dealing with a department, a city department that doesn't want to do the right thing because if they adjust the rule, they say they would lose their job, but they wouldn't lose their job. They would just do the right thing.
Oh, you think they're not being honest about the notion that they would lose their job?
I don't think they're being honest, and they're also being, it's like being very narrow-minded to not look at what someone else what someone else could lose. And then I'm
Mhm.
also paying for the mistake monetarily and they don't
Well,
care.
Well, first
So
of all, I hope it all works out
thank
to
you.
your benefit and to the
I
benefit
wish
of everyone.
it was fair.
And and I think that sometimes we have these situations where you just look at someone and say, "Come on, you got nothing to lose. All I need you to do is X. I'll gain something, and you won't lose anything." Dr. Eisenberg, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I was thinking more at a group level than individual.
Let's
It
hear it.
happens all very frequently institutionally. So I was a university prof for many years, and if not to talk without any content, if one group could get a candy from administration that the other group was not going to get anyway, no matter what, the other group would not. But both groups had to vote in favor of it so that one group could benefit from it. It would never happen in a department, in a university department. So there's something that I think you're touching on that I'm hearing at a different level, which is about the other. So it's not so much about what one has or what one doesn't have, but there's something about the other not being me. And so when the other gains, or so anyway, I'm reading that into what you're talking about. So
Great. So these two examples, I just want us to note that these two examples are mirrors of each other. Because in Marina's example, somebody has something that you want, Marina, and you're saying it doesn't hurt you to give it to me, and I would gain, right? So in that sense, Connie, they're protecting what they have. Your example is nobody has anything yet. And it's a question of whether I'm willing, even though it's not going to be a loss to me, am I willing to let somebody else get ahead? Even though I would never possibly catch up to them. It's not even, right? And it's
if I
mirror
can't have
image.
it, you can't have it.
Right. It's a mirror image of the same thing. I think that's great actually to think about. So I want to look at the Gemara's example, the Talmud's example, and it has many examples. But what I love about this example is, first of all, it takes place in a family. That's number one. Because family, sometimes these questions of, am I losing, or do I have nothing to lose and you only have to gain? Or Connie, as you're saying, the fact that you're gaining and I'm not, it brings up the competition and the kind of love that's supposed to overcome competition. So we're going to look at an example that is, first of all, it's about inheritance. So we know the many spats that happen over inheritance because we're talking about people getting property for free. You're also talking about people's legacy and am I the favorite and who, right? And I could be even triggering people's own experiences, but that's real. We're talking about where there's a court involved that's going to mandate something that you would have expected siblings to be able to do of their own love. And if siblings can't do that, how much more so the average person? Or, by the way, you could argue the opposite. With somebody out there, I don't want to look bad, so I'm going to be the bigger person. But with my own family, maybe I will be a little bit tough. So let's look at the example. And remember, what we are looking for here is, what do we gain by having a rule that says we are not going to allow you to act like a sodomite? In other words, the court is going to enforce that you give your sibling the bagel, right? The court will come in. It is a rule that you have. And what do we lose through enforcement? Or what are the challenges of enforcement? Okay. So I'm going to read a few pieces because this has 4 scenarios. Okay. I want to read, I think, 2 of the scenarios first. It's all part of the same passage in the Gemara in the Talmud. Okay. Let's take a look. And I'm happy to send this to anybody. No, I'll send this to Rabbi Fishman, who can send it out to everybody who is here, and we can post it also with the recording. So we're looking at the Babylonian Talmud in Tractate Bava Batra. And Tractate Bava Batra, there's a lot here actually in the tractate about the question of I'm not losing, but you're gaining, or better yet, I'm not losing, but you are losing. And if I change, maybe neither of us have to lose, right? So there's a lot there, and there's a lot there about inheritance. And here we go. I'm going to read in Aramaic, which was the English of the time, and translate it, okay? Hahu de Zavan Ara, a Mitzra de Be Nashe. There was a person, a son, because the Talmud generally talks about sons inheriting. There was a son who chose to buy a plot of land next to his father's estate. Now, the father's still alive, okay? But he has siblings, this brother. He has brothers, which means he's not going to be the only inheritor when the day comes that their father, passes. So what happens when their father passes? Kikapalgu, when it was time for them to split the inheritance among the siblings, Amar Lahu, this man who had bought a plot of land next to his father's estate on one side, he said, Pligu li amitzrai, can you give me the part of the estate that's next to the land that I already own? I mean, assuming that all of these plots are somewhat similar in value, why not? What do the other brothers stand to lose by not giving it? What's the big deal, right? It's like, Alana, I'm going back to your salad, right? There's 3 salads there. And I say, I'm sitting closest to this salad. Can you just give me that salad? They say, no, you can't have that salad, right? Come on, what's the problem? So look at this. Amar Rabba, Rabba says, Kigon Zed, this is a perfect example, Kofin al Midat Sodom. We force the other brothers to give this brother the plot of land that's contiguous with lands he already owns. Because what's the problem? It's not, they're all of the same value. Seems pretty cut and dried, except Matkifla Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef disagrees. He attacks. He says, no. This is not true. Amri le'ache, his brothers can say to him, this is not Midat Sodom. Ma'alinan le'iluya. We consider this piece of land that you want to be very valuable. Ki nichse de be Bar Merion, as valuable as the estate of Bar Merion, which was a wealthy estate in Talmudic times. Wait, what? Wait a second, Mauricio, you got to explain this to me. You and I are brothers. God forbid our father dies. God forbid. I have a piece of land right next to Dad's estate, And you say to me, sorry, Alana, that piece of land is very valuable to me. You can't have it. What does that even mean? So the commentators say, oh, it must be, Rashi says, as a commentator, it must be that plot of land that I'm asking for is somehow better. Maybe it gets, the rainy season is enough for it to be, maybe there's like some actual difference in value. But that's not really what's in here, right? So another interpretation, which comes from Tosfot, is they say, what do you mean? Mauricio turns to me and says, if somebody wants a piece of land very badly, that piece of land just went up in value. Why should it be any different? I could get good money for that land from you. If I got it in the family lottery, I could get good money for that land from you. We live in a capitalistic society. Why should you suddenly get a piece of land that is more valuable for nothing? We should be allowed to do a lottery. If I get the land, you can pay me a little extra and take it. That's what Rav Yosef says. He says, this is not the attribute of Sodom. Mauricio stands to lose something. He could have made a business deal with me, and now he can't. And by the way, the Gemara then says, Rav Yosef is right. This is not a case of Sodom. First of all, I want to make sure everybody understands the case. Does everybody understand the case? All right. What do you think? Do you think this situation where I have a piece of land right next to Dad's land, Mauricio should just give it to me? Do you think it's Midat Sodom? He doesn't stand to lose. The land is worth the exact same. It's just subjectively worth more to me. Or do you think the laws of business should kick in and say, no, Mauricio should get a chance to maybe get that land and charge me a few bucks for it, the way if somebody else lived on the edge of that property, he could charge them a few bucks. What do you think? I want to open it up, and you won't be wrong. And you can ask a question if you need a clarification. I want to say one last sentence here, which is, I think that what Rav Yosef is saying is, you know, you're telling me Mauricio is not losing anything. But Mauricio is telling you, I do stand to lose something. We're not using the regular rules of business here. This is not a bagel that I was going to throw out. This is something that could be worth more to me. And so we encounter the sense of, well, if you're trying to make a rule that says, if you're not going to lose anything and somebody else can benefit, you should let them benefit. You got to make sure you know that somebody's not losing anything, right? You need to be able to determine that.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, so let's get your thoughts. Eunice, what were you going to say?
Yeah, so I think I'm with the rabbis on this because the value of the land is of essence here. There could be a river on that land, which is not on any of the other pieces of property. So I think that, yeah, as the assessment has to be made on the value of the land before it's apportioned.
Okay, so you basically want to say, I'm basically, Mauricio is saying to me, sorry, Mauricio, that we're using it as an example, but at each point, you know, Terry's iPhone is going to be an example at some point too. And iPhone 514 is going to be an example too, right? Eunice is basically saying, look, let's appraise the land. Maybe Mauricio is saying to me, no, Alana, you don't understand. There is something about that land that's better. And therefore, this isn't just a neutral barter. But what about the opinion that says, Mauricio can say, I don't want to just give you that land because if this were a business deal, I can make more money off it, right? Like, because you need it. And if I win in the lottery, I can charge you. What do you think of that perspective? Does anyone have thoughts on that perspective? It's okay if you don't, but if you do, we want to hear them.
There is something that does disturb me about the thought of brothers placing monetary value before, I don't know, like not acceding to the wishes of a sibling. But in the real world, let's face it, I mean, you know, you talked about mild things happening at time of inheritance, but families totally break apart. I mean, there are siblings who never speak to each other again, etc. So I'm sort of idealizing a sibling relationship, maybe based on my own life, but it's
good. I'm glad you have that.
It's hard to imagine. I mean, yes, one would look at the value, but it's hard to imagine disrupting one sibling's plan.
Yeah.
If there's really no need.
And by the way, and Terry, we want to hear you in a second. By the way, it's also interesting who's the victim, right? The first opinion that says we force Mauricio to give me the land says we don't want Alana to walk away as the victim. She'll maybe never talk to her brother again, right? Meaning there's going to be reverberations of this. But the second opinion that says, no, you got to give Mauricio a chance to get it and charge Alana a few extra bucks if he gets it in the lottery, because that's capitalism. That's saying we don't want Mauricio to be the victim. That's not fair, right? Like, it's interesting. Who's the victim? Terry, did you want to say something? Do you want to come in?
I don't know. I'm just thinking of like sibling rivalry. I'm thinking of my grandkids who, like, you know, it's always, that's not fair. That's not fair. I guess it depends on where the siblings stand. And I mean, if they were all equal to begin with, I don't know. I guess if you have a double portion, it means more than the single portions. And so there's
Right.
sibling rivalry.
There's something here about recognizing that people are going to be very upset if they stood to gain and somebody else wasn't going to lose and still wouldn't do for them. And there are people who are going to be equally upset if they said, you made me lose something for that other person to gain, and you just ignored my loss, right? That's scenario one. These brothers ain't done yet, okay? We're moving to scenario two, and Eunice, in scenario two, you are going to see it looks like these pieces of land are exactly the same. And yet, Let's take a look, okay? Scenario 2. Let's make this nice and big. Okay. Scenario 2. What if instead of we have this property and there's these pieces here and it's closer to my property, but let's say property has like a river on it or a water channel. Okay, same properties, Eunice, it's the same. The one that Mauricio is going to get has a water channel. The one that I'm going to say iPhone 514 is going to get has a water channel. Same thing, right? But one of them has a plot of land next to it and wants it. So here's how it goes. Tre arata, 2 pieces of land, a tre nagre, next to 2, each on a water channel. They each have it. Imagine 3 plots of land. One I own already. The next one was my father's, has a nice water channel running down it. The next one was also my father's, has a nice water channel running down it. Now, I obviously want the one next to my property, right? So I'm a Rabba. Rabba says, you got to force Mauricio to give me that middle one. Of course, it's right on my property. What's the big deal, Mauricio? You get the other one with the water channel. I get this one with the water channel because it's next to my property. You can't keep me from something just because, I don't know, just because you want it, just because you can, right? In comes Rav Yosef again. Matkifla Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef challenges. Zimnin daha midvil v'hai lo midvil. Says, not going to work. Not going to work. Just because we each have a water channel doesn't mean they're both going to work equally well. You can't expect me to get that water channel and Mauricio has to get that one. What if his water channel isn't working one week and my water channel is? Instead, what you got to do, cut it in half. He'll get the top, I'll get the bottom. He'll get the top. This way we both get a little bit of both water channels. That's what we need to do. Because when I say to Mauricio, you got nothing to lose. I've got a water channel, you got a water channel. He says, I totally have something to lose. What happens if 1 week yours is working, mine is not working? I need access to both water channels, and so do you, right? Again, we're saying what I told Mauricio was not a loss to him. He says it totally is a loss to me. You can't tell me what you think is not a loss. You're ignoring the potential loss that I might incur, right? I want to pause here. People see that example, right? What do you think of that example, right? We're going to go example to example. Yeah, Marina, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I kind of agree with that example because let's say in a case where like a family has lots of jewelry and you allocate jewelry to jewelry, well, the stones could have a different value. So it's not exactly even. It would be more proper to split the value of everything, right? Like the total value. And I just also wanted to ask a question. In the previous example that you had, when you were reading the Hebrew, it said mitzvah, and it looked like Mitzrayim. Is there some association that you're being enslaved when you?
Well, first of all, I love that as like a homiletics, but the word mitzar actually means boundary.
Okay.
And the reason it means boundary is because it's like a strait. It's what holds you in, right? Now, Mitzrayim, Egypt, we often make the connection between a place of our straits where we were like penned in, right? But the word Mitzar actually means boundary. So it is somewhat connected. But yes, meaning I think that the rabbinic conversation here of, okay, here's a scenario where I know for sure this is the attribute of stone if you're not willing to do it. And then Rav Yosef comes and says, what do you mean? Mauricio stands to lose something. And then they try again and they say, no, this example, for sure, it's the attribute of Sodom if you're not willing to give it to the sibling. And Rav Yosef says, no, that's not true. He stands to lose something. Not every stone and every jewelry is going to hold up the same way. Same thing. Not every water channel is going to hold up the same way, meaning they're having a hard time finding a situation where you truly can say, you're not going to lose anything by giving me something. They're having a hard time finding it. And I think that says something, right? And I don't think it's accidental that they're Like, they could have gone straight to the example that they can find that truly is an uncontroversial example of you're throwing the bagel in the garbage. But that's not what they do. They want to find an example to show you how hard it is. If you're trying to enforce, listen, at least do something for someone where you have nothing to lose. Yeah, you tell me when I have nothing to lose. Is there even such a thing? That's what we're trying to find out, right? Okay, third example. You ready? Third example. And you guys are
And
the...
Alana.
Yes, of course. Let me pause. Alana and Alana. Yes.
So I think like at the beginning of the first thing that you said about if you stand to lose something, sorry, if you don't stand to lose something and the other person gains, I think it's not black and white. And so I think that's what you're coming to.
Yes.
And that's what I was thinking. Like I was
Yes.
just thinking of, well, maybe like I have siblings also. And if my father gives something to me, maybe it's, not fair to the other child so they can gain. So anyways, I just
Right.
think it seems so black and white and it was short and curt, but it's obviously not.
But that's what I think is so great. One of the things that is just so hard is it is very hard to legislate people taking care of each other because people's losses are real. So as much as we would want to say, okay, but when it's like a clear-cut case that you're not going to lose anything, but the other person's going to gain, just take care of them. And they're like, find me a case like that where I'm not going to lose anything. And that's why it's so hard to regulate, right? They're going to try a third option where it's like, okay, there's one river, okay? There's one water channel, okay? We both have access to it. There's literally no difference. There's no difference. Mauricio, just give me the thing that's next to my... People are going to listen to this and be like, why won't Mauricio just give her the plot of land, right? Just take a look for a second at the third example. Ready? Here we go. I'm going down. Oop, I went down too far. Okay, I want to see if I can get this. Sec. How about if you have two plots of land on the same water channel? Tarti, two plots of land. Achad Nagra on one water channel. It's my land, my father's land, and a channel of water, and my father's other plot of land still on that channel. Maybe the channel runs this way, but the point is they're exactly equal. And all I want is for the other brother to just give me this plot because it's next to the land that I own, right? Amar Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef says, and by the way, notice Rav Yosef was the one who kept saying, no, the other person stands to lose. Here, he's the one who says, here is the pure example of where my brother has nothing to lose by letting me take the plot that's next to mine. So Amar Rav Yosef says, Kigon zeh, this is the example. Kofin al midatzdo. The court can force my brother to give me the piece that I want of land because it doesn't cost him anything. He has access to the water channel. It only allows me to benefit to be contiguous with my land. Matkif la Abaye. Abaye gives Rav Yosef a dose of his own medicine. He says, nope, I disagree. Your brother does stand to lose. Why? Matzi Amar, the brother could say, Ba'ina da'afish arisai, or arise. I want there to be more sharecroppers. Now, let me explain what that means. It means he wants specifically me to take this side, and he wants to be in the middle. You know why? Because I'm going to have to hire farmers for this piece of land, and I'm going to have to hire farmers for this piece of land, which means his land is going to be guarded by my farmers. So it's a benefit to him. It says, if you take the lands that are contiguous for you, I lose that. And that's not fair. I shouldn't have to lose that. Let's do a lottery and see how it comes out. But the Gemara says, no, Hilchatak Rav Yosef. We follow the ruling of Rav Yosef in this situation that my brother can't say that to me. That is not that, no. Fouché having more farmers around his plot of land, love Milty. That is not a good enough thing to say he's losing it and therefore he shouldn't have to do for me, right? So finally, we find still an argument, but a situation where Rav Yosef is willing to say, okay, finally, pure example. It's not, right? It's not something where someone's going to lose. I'm only going to gain, just help me, right? But it's still controversial. Abaye still tries to find, right? So you notice the first two examples, it was Rabbah said something. This is a clear-cut case of Sodom-like behavior. And Rav Yosef attacked and said, no, he stands to lose something. And now Rav Yosef said, this is a clear-cut case of acting like a sodomite. And Abaye comes and says, no, he stands to lose something, right? The last case is uncontroversial. Here we go, uncontroversial. Let's say we have a water channel on one side of a field and a river on the other side of the field. You gotta divide the fields diagonally so that we both get some of the water channel, some of the river. Nobody argues about that. No argument. They finally got somewhere where we just want to be able to make sure that everybody gets a plot of land, and that's it. Now, holy cow, this was exhausting. Can I ask you a question? As you're looking at these examples, who do you feel more pathos for? Like, who do you feel bad for? The brother who's saying, just give me a parcel of land that's next to the land I already own? Or the other brothers who say, hey, why not do a lottery like you're supposed to with the inheritance? Who do you feel for more? I'm gonna take your temperature for a minute. What do you think? And we need one example of each, right? Does somebody feel for the brother who says, I want the contiguous land more?
He seems to have more, so I feel for the others.
Okay, look, you already have enough, right? Back to Connie's point, you already have enough. You really need everything, right? Interesting. But by the way, I want to counter you, Terry. I want to be that guy's lawyer because he was smart enough to buy a plot of land next to dad's land. That was foresight. I didn't see any of the other brothers doing that. And nobody's saying they didn't buy lands because they don't have money. We don't know what the situation is, right? So I bought this land 10 years ago, knowing, and now you won't give it to me? This is crazy making. What else do we have? Marina, did you want to say something?
Yeah, well, that's why I was getting puzzled at the first example, because I didn't understand why the first brother was being, I would say, for lack of a better word, penalized for his foresight. Maybe he was the one who was always diligent and the other brother was just lazy and he wasn't doing anything. And now the lazy one just inherits.
Yeah, I completely hear that, right? Meaning, I think that's the first opinion that says, hey, the brothers are acting like sodomites. Like this brother had the foresight, let him have it. And the shocking thing is Rav Yosef in that situation says, yeah, but they're going to lose something because if this were a business deal, they'd be able to get more for this. Like, I don't know, maybe don't always make everybody, don't choose sides in a way, right? It's kind of interesting. Now, what I think is really interesting is that when you look at the way that the rabbis talk about Sodom, okay? The way that the rabbis talk about Sodom is not this. Has anybody ever read some of the rabbinic midrash, some of the rabbinic homilies about what Sodom was like? Trust me, it wasn't, oh, I can't give you this plot of land that's on our father's next to your estate, right? It wasn't that. It was much worse. Take a look, right? It was kind of the almost cartoonish, like really cartoonish. Take a look. Arba Dayane Hayu b'Sodom. There were 4 judges in Sodom. Already, by the way, only having 4 judges, that's not great. But there were 4 judges in Sodom. You know what their names were? Shakrai, liar. Shakrurai, habitual liar. Zaife, forger. And Matzle Dina. perverter of justice. Okay, already I think we got some stage names here, right? The courts themselves, right? These are not the commoners. These are the courts themselves are really bad. And we're going to see what's bad about them, okay? So these are some of the rules. These are some of their enforced laws. If God forbid, I'm adding the God forbid, somebody hit a woman who was pregnant, their friend's wife who was pregnant, umaflale, and God forbid, caused her to miscarry. This is what their ruling was. Amrile, they would say to him, Yahava nehale, give your wife to the man who hit her, dine abre nehalach,
Oh,
so that he can get her pregnant for you. Yeah, whoever said, oh, yeah, oh, what in the heck is going on here? Yeah, Alana, it's funny, but it's not funny, right? Meaning it's chelm, but it's like the worst version, right? It's like an evil version of chelm. Here we go. Now remember, this is rabbinic interpretation. They didn't really think this was real. This is them giving you a message, okay? Fine. They're trying to tell you the whole system is corrupt. Wait, there's more. Excuse me. Let's say somebody cut off the ear of their friend's donkey. Amrule, the judges would say, Hava ne'ale, you should give your donkey to the guy who did this, until the ear grows back. If somebody hit their friend, Amrle, they would tell the victim, Havle agra de shakalach dama, you should give him money because he just did the very ancient art of bloodletting for you. You should appreciate him. He did bloodletting for you, right? It's funny. They're making it kind of comical. And what they're trying to show is like, they really don't understand the value of caring for another person, right? They really don't. It's almost, you get rewarded for being selfish and harmful to others. By the way, do we know any societies in which you get rewarded for being selfish and harmful to others? How about every society? Meaning you tell me, find me a person who, when they've done harm to people, because they did harm, they don't win. I'm not saying everybody who does harm wins, but this is comedy, but it happens every day. It happens every day, okay? So the rabbis know what they're talking about. They know what they're giving you, right? Then it gets a little bit further, okay? How about this? We continue with this sort of strangeness. Da'aver b'mavra, if somebody crossed over the river by ferry, yav arba zuzeh, they have to pay 4 zuz, 4 coins. But da'aver b'maya, if they crossed in the water itself, meaning they literally swam in, yav timne zuzeh, they have to pay 8. Meaning it doesn't make sense. It's chelm, right? Zimnachada, one time, atahu koves, ekla lahatam, there was a laundryman who came there, Amrule, and they said to him, have dalid zuzim. You should pay 4 zuzim, 4 coins for crossing the river into our town. So he says, what do you mean? I didn't even take the ferry. I just swam over. Amrule, he said to them, Ana b'maya avri, I swam in myself. Why am I paying? I wasn't on a ferry. Amrule, oh, well, if you swam, then imkin have tmanya da'avrit b'maya. Right? Then you have to give 8. Like it doesn't, makes no sense, right? Lo yahiv, he refused to give the 8. So pidayuhu, so you know what happened? They wounded him. And atalakami didayana, he came in front of the judges. Amrle, and they said, havle agra de shakelach, you have to give the person who wounded you money, de shakelach dama. I don't know why I keep leaving off the last word of a phrase. Give this guy money because he did bloodletting for you. You should thank him for wounding you. And Taman Yuzuze, you should also give 8 coins to Avrit B'maya because you went through the water, right? So we're having a problem here, right? They're having a problem understanding what is proper behavior. But it's going to get to like the best comic point. You ready? The best comic point is when the biblical character of Eliezer comes in. The biblical character of Eliezer, who Abraham sent off to find a wife for his son Yitzchak, Eliezer ends up in Sodom one day, right? This is the imagination. Eliezer Eved Avraham Itra Mehatam. Eliezer, the servant of Abraham, showed up there one day. Hadyuhi, they hit him. Atalakame Dayana, he came in front of a judge. Amrle Havle Agra, you should give the guy who hit you money. Tishakalach Dama, because he did you a favor by bloodletting for you, which is a medical procedure. So you know what Eliezer did? Shakil Glala, he picked up a stone, Padyuhi Ihula Dayana, and he threw it at the judge. Amar Mai Hai, the judge says, what did you just do throwing a stone at me? Amar Le, Eliezer says, what do you mean? Agra denafik liminach, the money that you now owe me for wounding you, because that's what you said, you pay the people who wound you. The money that you now owe me, Havnei ale lahai, give it to that guy who wounded me before. And I can keep my money in my pocket, right? He did something pretty brilliant. If they say if Terry hits Alana, Alana has to pay her. So Alana hits me, I pay Alana, Alana pays Terry, Alana doesn't lose any money. That's it, right? But what's the joke here, right? Like what's the real punchline here, right? It seems to be that these people have a real problem. These people have a problem of not what's mine is mine and what's yours is yours, but they think what's mine is mine and what's yours is mine, right? That's kind of what they think. That's the real worst kind of thing, where you ruin something of mine and I have to give it to you as a gift, right? Like that's like a real misunderstanding. What I think is remarkable about what the rabbis did is that that's not how far they went in terms of using Sodom for law, right? That's their homily. That's their story about Sodom. Nobody, they think, is going to be that terrible, right? Although we know this happens all the time, that people benefit from bad things that they do. We know this, right? But that's not the way it's supposed to be. But the harder thing to legislate is actually to legislate what the rabbis call in the legal literature that we saw, what the rabbis call the trait of Sodom. That's much harder. A situation where I'm not saying you have to give me your donkey that I just wounded, right? That doesn't make any sense. I'm not saying you have to pay me for wounding you. That's crazy. But there is a place where people really do have a big question mark of, where do I feel that I have to take care of someone else? And where do I feel that I have to take care of myself? And by introducing that ruling of, if you act like a sodomite, that you have nothing to lose, but somebody else has something to gain, that's no good either. And in fact, we're going to try to enforce it. But like every example of trying to enforce something and trying to make a rule, we're going to find that it's not always going to really cover the real life experience of people. Because like you said, Alana, it's not so black and white. So if you're going to try to really make a rule to enforce that Eunice is not going to do something where her neighbor loses out, right? You better make sure that it's something where Eunice is not going to lose also, right? That's not so easy to do. So we're left with the conundrum of, okay, how do we get people to actually care about other people if we experience our own loss as well? And what we're going to look at next time is an example that is much more mundane. It's much more trivial, everyday situation where it's not a rule that's telling you if you don't stand to lose, make sure that you don't keep someone else from gaining. But it's actually teaching people sometimes to use their discretion, to just be a good person, just be a big person. No one's going to enforce this. It may even come at a loss to you, but we want to inspire you to be a good person and almost compare what they need with what you need. And if what they need is more, help them, right? Something like that. But we're going to see with those examples too, there are some challenges that need to be considered. So thank you for joining me tonight. I do hope that you'll join me again in 2 weeks. And I really enjoyed learning with you and from you. I'm going to put my email address in the chat, because if you're thinking about something and it comes up, to me, that's like the most interesting, it's the most interesting stuff to hear. So thank you for joining me. And I didn't even say this at the beginning. Thank you to the Shire for hosting this. It's wonderful to be here. Have a wonderful evening, my friends.